Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this brisk January morning. We have a great program for you today because we have our supervisor, Stephen Sherrill, who represents District 2, which we are now in here, is going to introduce himself, tell himself a little bit about us, and allow you, the constituents, to ask questions. So that's a great program. A couple of other announcements, like next week, well, we have another supervisor. We have Connie Chan coming from District 1. And so please come next Sunday as well and bring your questions for Supervisor Chan. Also, next Sunday after church, next Sunday, by the way, is MLK Sunday, MLK weekend. We have another program in this room at 12:30 next Sunday, and it is called A Tribute to MLK, an Afternoon of Introductions. And its theme is going to be around the labor organizing that Dr. King did. Many people may not know that when he was assassinated in Memphis, he was there to attend and participate in a march of sanitation workers who were kind of an oppressed community there in Memphis. So we are trying to get Bill Shields, who has spoken here a few times, a labor organizer, and this is being done with the labor union across the street. All right, and then on the last, let's see, I think we have a Sunday off, and then at the last Sunday of January, we have Frances Aubrey, who is a Unitarian who has written a book called A Grandmother's Wisdom. And it talks about healing from trauma early in life. And I think that'll be a great program as well. Then we have a Sunday off. And then the second Sunday in February, we have Katia Padilla from the Latino Task Force will be here speaking. So those are the next few forums that we have. And I think I'd like to maybe have a moment of silence for the protester in Minneapolis who was so tragically murdered by ICE, Sarah Good. Thank you for that. I also want to mention how Q&A works at the forum if you haven't been here before. We do all of our questions at the end, so please write your questions on the cards that you'll find on the tables and some of the chairs. And then at around 10:15, we'll go to Q&A. So with that, Supervisor Sherrill, are you ready to speak to us? Wonderful. Great, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing I forgot. We do the Ohlone land recognition. Unfortunately, Dolores is here to keep me honest and to do that. Then we'll have Supervisor Sherrill.
Thank you so much. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, acknowledge that our community is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribes, the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working here, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. The Greater Bay Area is also the ancestral territory of the Miwok, Yokuts, Patwin, and other tribes. As the original stewards of this land, the indigenous peoples understood the interconnectedness of all things and maintained harmony with nature for millennia. We honor them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I'm the District 2 supervisor representing this neighborhood, kind of all the way down to the waterfront, plus the Presidio, plus Aquatic Park. And it's a real pleasure for me to be here today, and especially here today, because of the tradition that this community has had, not only here in San Francisco, but across the country. I was reading a little bit about the history the other day, and it's kind of, I was reading how strong in favor of support of the Union back in the Civil War this community was. This community has been a big fighter for marriage equality. And this community has been a big part of the sanctuary movement. And I think with the events of the last week, we've all seen how important it is to fight for diversity, to fight for community, and to fight for inclusion. So I just wanted to thank you all for inviting me here today. And again, it really is a pleasure to be here today with all of you. So a little bit of background on me. I've been the supervisor of District 2 for about a year. I was appointed when my predecessor, Catherine Stephanie, was elected to the state assembly. And since taking office, I've tried to have two focuses. The first focus is on the everyday issues that San Franciscans face. And in that, constituent services has been a big part of my office's focus, just answering what are the things you need. Is it broken sidewalks? Is it scooters on the streets? Is it just last week an overhanging tree that was blocking a stop sign on Webster and Pacific? Those little things that affect our daily lives are incredibly, incredibly important to each one of us. And I think it's important that we focus on those and acknowledge those. At the same time, public safety has been a concern for many around the city, just making sure we all feel safe and are safe, and that safe and clean streets are a priority. And for me, having worked in analytics and homelessness in the Mayor's Office of Innovation previously, I knew that people struggling on the street, I don't believe it is compassionate to leave them on the street. I believe it's compassionate to raise out our hands, offer them help, get them into a situation where they have the opportunity to succeed. It's about offering them stability, it's about offering them shelter, and it's about offering them services and care. The mental health and drug crises that we're facing right now are existential to so many of us, not only from a moral point of view, but also from an economic point of view, from a safety point of view, ensuring that we have clear linear pathways to success for individuals struggling, and that we get ahead of that we do much more on the prevention side, have been critical parts of what I've been focused on, not only for the last 3 years, but also the last year and this next year going forward. And then the final thing that I'll say that my office has been very focused on, especially from a legislative point of view, is making sure our small business corridors are thriving. You know, the magic of San Francisco is that we're this intellectual, cultural capital of the world. We really punch above our weight, which is amazing. But here in San Francisco, we love it because we retreat back to our little villages. And so we've seen Chestnut is one of the first neighborhood corridors to get back to pre-pandemic sales levels, which is amazing. Fillmore is looking better and better, but we still see Union Street, for instance, struggling, and making sure the businesses there have the support they need from the city, that we're not overburdening them unnecessarily, has been a critical part of my focus and will continue to be. But going forward, I think one of the things that we've all seen in this city over the last 30 years that the city has failed to address head on is the affordability crisis. We see it with housing, we see it with transit, we see it with childcare, we see it with public education. It is very hard to start a family here, to grow a family here, and to stay here across generations. That is a crisis that if we do not address it head on, we will fail, and we already are. We're already seeing we have the fewest number of kids per capita in America. We're the fastest aging city in America. And we have a growing gap in middle income people here in San Francisco. That's not a recipe for a successful city. And I'm very excited to be a part of that work going forward. Those are some of the things that I am focused on an everyday basis. And at the same time, as we look at some of the outside pressures we're seeing, especially from Washington, with the growing risk of fascism and authoritarianism across the world. We've seen it in Austria, and I think we've all seen what's happening here in the United States. So I think it's incredibly important for us to pay attention to the little everyday things we see in the city, to pay attention to the long-term existential trends that we have seen here, and also to be aware that many people in this city are deeply, deeply at risk, and we must continue to be a sanctuary city. We must continue to support our neighbors and our families if we're going to be successful going forward. And so with that, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spend too much time talking about myself, because mostly I'm excited to be here with all of you. And so I know there's some questions, Jeff, that have been submitted, and I'd be happy to take those. And before I take the first question, I just want to give an extra shout out to my friend Gino Fortunato, who thank you for inviting me and including me. Gino is somebody who I think has a very clear-eyed view on community and on supporting friends and family and friendship. And I just want to thank you, Gino, for roping me in today.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Gino. Hello, hello, is this on? Can't tell. Okay. First question is, what can you do to ensure that San Francisco has a steady and thriving bus and train routes?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. So I think this is something we can all do. So I think we all see, um, I don't know if everybody's aware of this. Muni has an upcoming fiscal deficit, a massive one, up to $300 million. Now, the MTA has made cuts in the administrative side to the tune of $150 million over the last couple years, which is very smart. It's strategic. It's important for them to run the system as efficiently as possible. But there is still a major fiscal deficit coming up. And the problem is because of their high fixed costs, a $300 million deficit, almost 20% of their budget, doesn't represent a 20% decrease in service levels. It's more like a 40% decrease in service levels. There is unquestionably a structural problem. How do we afford to support Muni when even if you're paying a full fare, the cost of Muni outpaces a full fare rider and probably will into the future? I don't think anyone here thinks paying $7 or $8 for a bus ride is the right answer. And obviously, there's so many in our community who cannot pay that. Approximately 50% of the people who ride Muni on a full-time basis are eligible for free Muni. Seniors, people of lower income, children. Now, at the same time, I think we know the other 50%, some of them aren't paying. Now, the delta there is not as high as I think we would hope, but we have a huge fiscal cliff coming up. So what I would say is I would highly encourage us all to look at the ballot measures that are coming up in November. There's a regional sales tax. There's a citywide parcel tax that will go, the regional sales tax will go to support all of the Bay Area transit agencies, BART, Muni included. The local parcel tax will go to support Muni. The local parcel tax, those details have not been ironed out, but it's going to come. Now, none of us like to pay more taxes. I agree with all of that, but it's critical. I would encourage you all to support the upcoming parcel taxes and sales taxes at the ballot. I know exactly how much the proposal will cost me. I don't like the idea of it, but I like the idea of 40% less Muni, even less. So I encourage you all to support that. I will be supporting that. At the same time, I will also be focused very keenly on Muni managing its finances appropriately, managing its administrative overhead, and being as efficient as possible. So I'd encourage you all to stand with me in favor of those taxes, which we don't love, to support Muni for all of our communities. And it'll help our business community too. It'll help our downtown recovery. So it will help generate more tax growth in the basis. So I highly encourage you all to support those at the ballot in November.
Thank you. We have recently upzoned vast swaths of our city. I believe that's called the Family Zoning Plan to allow increased heights. How are you working to get the buildings already entitled built to take pressure off increased development in smaller scale neighborhood corridors like Chestnut, Union, et cetera? And maybe you could include your thoughts on the Family Zoning Plan here too.
Sure.
It's not, I don't think.
Here, do you want to use?
on.
Here, do you want to use this one?
Yes, I'll read it again. Okay, that's much louder, isn't it? We have recently upzoned vast swaths of our city to allow increased heights. How are you working to get the buildings already entitled built to take pressure off increased development in smaller scale neighborhood corridors like Chestnut and Union?
That's a great question. There are approximately 70,000 entitled, meaning they've gone through the planning process. They've gotten zoning approvals for the building. 70,000 housing units that are stuck. And that is a massive problem. The city has not bent over backwards over the last 20 years to unlock those. Now, are there macroeconomic forces, tariffs, labor costs, other materials costs, interest rates that are getting in the way? Yes, of course. But that doesn't mean that we here in the city shouldn't be doing everything we can. So on the city side, here are the things that are getting away. Permitting timelines are insanely long. Our construction regulations are outdated and in many times unnecessary. They haven't kept up with the pace of change of technology. I'll give you an example. For tall high rises, over 30 stories, we require not one, but two different versions of safety design standards. There is an old one called structural-based design standards, which was developed in the 30s with a slide rule. Fine. Performance-based design standards are newer, state-of-the-art, use a variety of computer-based testing and digital modeling. They can actually prove how safe a building will be. We still require both of those, even though structural design simply says how much concrete to put on top of steel. That's not literally accurate, but it's directionally accurate. And there is no scientific basis for that. It adds about 1% in costs for a 30, 40-story building downtown. That's a great example of how we haven't embraced the growth of technology and science to lower costs in a way that does not affect safety at all. That's one small example. The other things on the cost side, local taxes obviously can increase costs. Local fees can increase costs and permitting timelines as well, as I said. On the tax side, for large-scale projects, when it comes to these large housing developments, they usually cost over $25 million. For properties over $25 million, we have a local transfer tax of 6%. Is that a lot? Is that a little? Well, it's 60 times the statewide average. That doesn't seem right to me. And so looking at things like that, why did we increase it? Is it generating the funds we need? That is problematic and inhibiting some of the housing development. And the last thing is how we charge fees on projects. Rightfully so, we charge fees for a variety of things: traffic impacts, electrical upgrades, sewer upgrades, sidewalk upgrades, and affordable housing. Right now, the primary way that we fund affordable housing is by charging a fee on the construction of market rate housing. I don't think that's a crazy concept, but there are two problems. One is that fee on the market rate housing is charged at the very beginning of the process for market rate housing, when the money is most expensive to the developer. It also increases the cost of that market rate housing, 6, 7, 8, 9% sometimes. The other problem is last year in 2024, it only generated $9 million for affordable housing. It's not generating enough money consistently enough. And it costs about $1 million to build an affordable unit. So the inclusionary fees, the affordable housing fees, which are good, paid for 9 units of affordable housing, that to me says, hey, this isn't working. And so we're exploring ways to decrease the cost up front for market rate developers to make it easier to build all projects, and look on the back end using tax increment financing. Marina Melgar has led on this so far, but using tax increment financing. This is a concept where if an empty lot is paying $1 in taxes today, you build an apartment building there, it pays $10 tomorrow. Could you take $2 of that 9 incremental dollars and put it towards affordable housing? It's a long-term, stable stream of funding. So this is one idea. It's not baked. I'm not promising that. But these are some of the things that we need to do to not only unlock some of the housing that's stuck in the pipeline now, but also to increase the funding for affordable housing, which we desperately need. And that's at all income levels: teachers, firefighters, police officers. That's at all income levels to really fill that gap that we have here in San Francisco.
Thank you. What are you doing to work with Safeway Corporation to ensure we keep grocery and pharmacies open and that proposed development is of scale in our neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think many of you are probably aware of the 25-story proposal on top of the Marina Safeway. It's one that I am very disappointed about, to say the least. I was a little stronger on Instagram, but I'll leave it there. One of the reasons that I thought the family zoning plan was so important was that current state laws allow for things like this Marina Safeway proposal. And so the family zoning plan provided higher heights than locally had been allowed previously, but also provided more certainty than the state laws provide. So that 25-story Marina Safeway proposal, once the family zoning plan takes law, which is, I'm forgetting my dates now, but any day now, that would not have been legal. Now, they got it in before the deadline. Should we have moved faster? Perhaps. Do I think they would have gotten it in before the deadlines if we'd moved faster? Yes, I do. And so what we have to work on here locally and looking at projects like that, there are two things we're talking about here. The question was, I think, two things. It was one, How do we make, some people I think don't like a 25-story building in the marina. I also don't think so. I think there are dangers with liquefaction, a variety of other elements. And two, how do we ensure grocery store access? So let me talk about the grocery store access part first, because we've seen what happens in the Fillmore. We've seen what happens just here when the Walgreens closes here on Post Street, Walgreens on Lombard and Divisadero. That was an excellent one at a parking lot, great access for seniors, and potentially in the marina with the Safeway. That services so many people across the income spectrum. Oddly enough, it's one of the 5 most profitable Safeways in America. And I think we all can say, yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things that we looked at when Walgreens closed, there were 3 factors that their team enunciated to me that were the top 3 factors. One was e-commerce competition. Okay, fine. We get that for a pharmacy. The second was the way that the state of California reimburses on Medi-Cal, on pharmaceuticals for Medi-Cal. Interesting. I didn't know that. The third was the gross receipts tax. This is a city tax that, in addition to other things, was passed that was passed to fund anti-homelessness homelessness prevention and initiatives. Now, I think we need to have homeless shelters. I think we need to have housing for homeless people. I think it's incredibly important. But we also need to be careful where are these taxes coming from. So right now, I think we need to make sure that community resources like grocery stores and pharmacies are not being taxed as much as they are today. These businesses have very low margins, and whether we like the corporations and the private equity owners or not, and Cerberus that owns Safeway right now is not exactly my favorite person in the world. They are in it for every last dollar. But I think we have to be honest about the fact that they are in it for every last dollar. And if we want to make a business environment that allows for these companies to succeed here, we saw in the Bayview, Lucky's, their big grocery store, just closed. We have to make it a little bit easier from a tax point of view to keep them there. So I think we have to have tax incentives to be opening new grocery stores in areas that are either at risk or suffering, like the Fillmore, and I hope not the Marina, but I do think we need to make it a little bit easier for these community-focused businesses to be here. I think we can differentiate between, say, Salesforce doing business in San Francisco and a pharmacy or a grocery store. And I think that's fair for us to do. We've been a little too cookie cutter with the way that we've taxed businesses here in San Francisco. I would prioritize these community resources more. On the subject specifically of the development proposal at the Marina Safeway, I think there are a few things that we can do here. One, for buildings 25 stories and higher, they have to go through a very specific local high-rise construction permitting process. It has to be deemed safe by the building department and the mayor's office. What they have proposed so far is not safe. They have not proposed going down to bedrock, despite of the 250 feet of liquefaction, a variety of other elements. So this is something that the mayor's office and I are very aligned on. What they're proposing is very inappropriate. I think short-term unsafe, long-term unsafe, and so that's one element of it. At the same time, there are levers we can use on local taxes and other things to make it financially inviable. I think we need more housing in this city, but we need appropriate housing. That's why, as part of the family zoning plan, I made sure that that site would be marked at a 4-story building. Now, at the same time, if it is going to be built there, we have to make sure we have grocery access to the neighborhood. That is a key focus going forward. I don't want to look away at that, but we are very focused on this current proposal and what I think are the lack of focus on safety. I don't think it's a viable proposal. Just last week, the developer reached out to both me and the mayor for a sit down. I look forward to having that in the coming weeks so that we can encourage them to work closer with the community, which they have not been willing to do so far.
The latest question is also on the Safeway, so I'll just ask it. My question is about the 25-story apartment building being built in place of the existing historic Safeway store near Ford Mason. A new Safeway store will be built into the first story of the building. The height of the proposed project to be built by Align Real Estate will be in excess of 300 feet. How can you or the mayor be in opposition to the Marina Safeway project when you have advocated for YIMBY policies that created this project? Isn't it an example of the dog catching the car?
I don't think I advocated for any of the policies that created the laws for that specific project. I've advocated for the family zoning plan, which specifically changed the base zoning, the local zoning, not only for a local density bonus project, but also for a local project. I advocated for the change of that. We got that in the family zoning law. Um, the local zoning that allowed this state law to be implemented here was passed in, I believe, 2016 or 2017, well before I was on the Board of Supervisors. I didn't advocate for the specific policies that allowed this proposal to go through. I am definitely an advocate for policies that allow more housing to be built citywide. Absolutely, no question. I won't shy away from that. I'm very proud of that. This specific one, I didn't. So I
Okay. The next question is also on housing. Since you and State Senator Scott Wiener officially endorse each other, where do you and Senator Wiener differ on housing policy and other issues?
I have not yet officially endorsed Senator Wiener. He has endorsed me, and I'm happy to have his endorsement. He has a strong environmental record. He has a strong record of standing up for our immigrant community and for our LGBTQ community. So, I think he's definitely someone who works hard and is a fighter. Um, on the housing policy elements, I believe in local control of housing. I believe in a strong, I believe in a strong city zoning policy that allows for opportunity, that allows for reasonable, sensible growth. And I haven't loved the idea of the cudgel being waved over our heads from the state. I think that results in projects like the Marina Safeway. At the same time, I think we have to be totally honest about the fact that at the local level here in San Francisco, we have failed to drive affordability from an opportunity point of view. And we have failed to increase the amount of housing here. Jobs have grown since 2008, more than 8 times the rate of housing units. That's not a recipe for success. And so, although I think the state laws have gone too far in putting us in too narrow of a bind, and one of the reasons why I thought the family zoning plan was so important was the penalties for not doing so were the total waiving of all local control, where the state could totally take over and say, build anything anywhere. 25 stories Marina Safeway, why not go 50? That was some of the result. And do I like that? No. But I do think we have to be clear-eyed about the fact that San Francisco is becoming less affordable each and every day, and that we need to create more opportunity. And then we also got to get a handle on the construction costs. We have to make it less than $1 million to build an affordable unit of housing. But I think that there's no question we need more housing here in San Francisco. I don't like a one-size-fits-all policy across the state that puts us in narrow binds. But if we don't be honest with ourselves about the restraints we've put on this city, we will continue to have 70,000 units stuck in the pipeline and 80 and 90, and we won't create more opportunity for the 50% of the San Francisco firefighters who can't afford to live here in the city.
Talking about Union Street, my unscientific view of Union Street is that it has more stores now than it did a year ago. Are there any specific plans to help merchants there, and what more could be done?
Oh, that's a great question. Chestnut Street is back to pre-pandemic levels for sales tax receipts, which is amazing. Fillmore Street is doing great, and there are a bunch of new restaurants. There's only one, I think there are 2 unleased spaces on Fillmore Street right now. There are more empty storefronts, it looks like, but all but 2 of those have leases signed, and you'll see restaurants, maybe one retail store opening up starting this summer, which is really exciting. Sacramento Street, slowly but surely coming back as well. Union is the street in the district that is having the most trouble, for sure. There are more stores opening, and with a slew coming on, half of Sur La Table has been leased out. Breakfast Little is going into the old space that, oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. The fabulous Michelin star chef, French. Thank you, Dominique Cren's old spot there. Thank you. Union Street is having more openings, but it is struggling from a foot traffic point of view. There are a few things we're doing there. We passed legislation to allow them to have an entertainment zone. This is a concept that creates incentives for small scale street events. So the Union Street Fair, big event, shut down the street. That is big. That takes a lot of work. That is not a reasonable thing to expect on a regular basis. But could you have sidewalk wine walks? Vantage Realty in November put a band on their little porch. Could you have the bars and restaurants support that and have a little bit more fun? This entertainment zone allows the bars and restaurants, if they get the permits, to sell beer and drinks in to-go cups and kind of have these more community-based events. We're excited to allow that flexibility. There are time constraints, there are management plans and all that, which are critical. I think having situations where you have drunken revelry spilling up and down on the side streets is a bad idea. That is not the goal of this. But little things like that are important, making it easier for the open storefronts to be filled. We're going to extend first year free again. It waives fees for new storefronts. I know that seems like it doesn't support the existing businesses, but by filling vacant storefronts, it creates more action on the street, brings more people. It does support those. So we've got to keep going on and on. We're working with DPW on the neighborhood corridors program for the individuals who kind of sweep the streets and keep things extra clean. But it's one thing after another, making it easier for the appropriate restaurants to have tables and chairs on the sidewalk. Union Street is kind of narrow. At times, it's a little difficult for them to really do that. That still meets with ADA permitting processes, but it's a lot of little things that we're focused on to bring a little bit more life, a little bit more juice back, especially on Union Street. It is doing a little bit better than last year. The restaurants are doing better. Restaurants were up in 2025. Retail was down a little bit in 2025. Kind of an interesting delta. It was the opposite in 2024. But we need to keep being clear-eyed about the fact that they do need more help and support.
Okay, someone wrote, I don't understand the constant talk about more housing of any kind. Traffic is too heavy. There's no parking. Decreasing stores, as you mentioned already, and infrastructure and other insurance must be limited. And other resources must be limited. I guess it's kind of about balancing homelessness versus transportation or something like that. These are
Do you mind rereading the question?
Yeah. Someone said, I don't understand the constant talk about more housing of any kind for the following reasons. Traffic is too heavy. There's no parking, decreasing stores, as you mentioned, and infrastructure and other resources must be limited. In other words, how can we build more here? This is kind of what I think they're saying.
This sounds like a chicken and the egg question. So if I'm misinterpreting, sorry, but I'll answer it that way. Stores need customers. And if they don't have more customers, they will close. Number one issue on Union Street is foot traffic from every single merchant. Foot traffic is down. Tourism is coming back, not as quick as you'd like. It is coming back. 2025, tourism up, but international tourism is down. The president is not exactly helping things on that account, but tourism is up. Now we've got to keep moving. We've got more conventions at Moscone this year than in a year coming up than in a year since the pandemic. We got the Super Bowl coming up, World Cup qualifying matches, all good things. But to say that we don't have enough stores to support more people, I think that's a chicken and the egg. I think more people will create demand for more stores. I live in Presidio Heights. We are very excited about the two projects around Laurel Village, 3700 California and 3333 California being built, as are the merchants at Laurel Village. I'm excited to get another restaurant on Sacramento Street. We think that will help there. In terms of the congestion side, there is no question that congestion is very high right now. There are more cars on the streets of San Francisco today than ever in history. And about 60% of that is related to Uber, Lyft, and Waymo. Rideshare, and this is a trend that's been increasing since 2015, more or less when Uber came. That increase in cars on the street has created a massive amount of congestion. Additionally, even though total commuters into the city is still down from pre-pandemic levels, a huge majority of those are driving cars. The percentage of commuters in cars is significantly up. The people coming back on BART, on Caltrain is not back up to where it was. And I think that's why this conversation that we started off with Muni and with supporting regional transit is so, so important. So there's no question that congestion is up. There's no question we need to rethink our streetscapes. There's no question that 10 years from now, what is the effect of autonomous going to be on individual transportation? Are electric buses going to be part of the future? Are electric bicycles and scooters? How do we deal with those in a much safer manner than we have been today? There is no question that congestion is up massively, and it's because there are more cars on the street than ever before. We need to rethink our streetscape, rethink our parking, how we can support all these in a safe, environmentally friendly, and free-flowing manner.
Was allowing Ubers and Waynos on Market Street again a good idea?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't focused enough on Market Street to really know. What I would say is the better Market Street, greater Market Street. Oh, I'm going to screw up the nomenclature. But the plan previously that had a future of Market Street that was put in place first with the closing for individual vehicles, that plan is not happening. That's kind of been shelved. The grand plan has been shelved. And so what I would say is that having a halfway plan probably doesn't make sense. And I do think it's worth rethinking it. If we're not going to do that grand plan, let's not stick with the halfway, because the halfway I don't think was really working. So let's rethink things in total. I thought the design competition for Market Street that was last year had some interesting ideas. I'm not sure any of them were perfect, but they were interesting. So I don't quite know enough to answer that question directly, and I'm not trying to punt. I just don't know enough about it personally, but I do think we need to rethink it in general.
Okay, thank you. You were talking about the slight rebound in tourism. What support can the city do for artists and live music?
Oh God, that's a great question. I don't know who asked that. I love art. I love live music. I think having places for artists and musicians to live in San Francisco is incredibly important. I was at one of the museums recently, and I asked the group who the greatest living and working San Francisco artist was today, and there were kind of crickets. And then someone said Woody Diothello, and I love Woody Diothello, but he lives in Oakland. Um, and so I think that's one element of it. There are not, we were just, I took a tour of the Clay Theater yesterday. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to tour the Clay. It is well worth going. They're giving open tours to almost everybody. It's being refurbished as a theater. The designs are beautiful. Page and Turnbull is the architect. It's going to be slightly smaller to accommodate ADA access, which is great. We're introducing a new law to allow them to serve beer and wine, which I think will help the bottom line, but also help everybody have a nicer time. Actually, that's going to apply to movie theaters across the city, which will be great. Movie theaters are really struggling economically, I think, as we all know. Sorry. Anyway, but in terms of artists, one of the people on the tour said, hey, there aren't as many venues for open mic performances as there used to be pre-COVID. I thought that was an interesting concept. I've got two little kids, 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so we're not like out and about all that much at night. So I haven't been going to these things anyway. But having more venues like the Clay that will be open for community performances, I think are great. But I also love the idea of these entertainment zones encouraging, the corner musician, the saxophonist, the jazz trio to be playing there. And so, for instance, with the Clay, in conjunction with the Fillmore Jazz Festival, the Fillmore Jazz Festival, I think is so fun, but it ends at 6 p.m. And that's great. We shouldn't have like jamming music out until all hours of the night in the middle of the street. But where are the venues to move it inside on the street? How do we make that more flexible? So I think that's one thing. Working on some film credits. I know that's not art, but it's artistic film credits for production here in the city with Raphael Mandelman. There's specific artist-centric housing that we passed legislation for late last year that will be built on Market Street, but creating living spaces for these individuals. And again, we talked about police officers and firefighters and teachers. Artists fit into that. There are not spaces for artists to be living here effectively and working here, whether those are musicians or otherwise. And so supporting the arts, I would highly encourage everyone to support the symphony, the opera, the ballet. But it's about spaces and about creating flexibility so that there are venues for them to perform.
Are you aware of any plans to help the Jazz Center on Fillmore reopen?
Oh gosh. Not enough other than to say it's incredibly frustrating. And I think that neighborhood specifically really demands focus. I mean, you talk about development at Safeway. We've been trying to push Safeway to redevelop that site for a while. Adding really great neighborhood housing there, supporting Lower Fillmore would be incredible. I haven't been personally involved in those. I could ask Bilal Mahmoud, my colleague, who can get back to you. But that would be a great venue to have up and running and jumping again.
Thank you. Can we count on your support for no parking meters on Sundays?
Kind of my support for no parking. Oh gosh. Well, look, I think this is one where my honest answer, I don't know. I don't know. I don't like parking meters on Sundays personally. I was able to park here on Franklin Street and not worry too much about it. I personally don't like it, but I also know that when we have a $936 million deficit facing us next year, when we have a $300 million MTA deficit, it is a massive problem. And I'm not comfortable putting a hard line yes or no without weighing all the various academic mathematic factors. Now, I will say the move to put parking meters across the Marina and Cow Hollow in late 2024, I didn't think that made a lot of sense. I didn't think it was communicated well in very residential neighborhoods. It would have had a disproportionate impact on the folks who work on Union and Chestnut, not only just the residents. It actually, when we looked at it, would have had a bigger impact on the people who work there, even more than the residents. So I think we need to be careful about it. I'm not willing to take a yes or no position on that, but I think having no parking meters on Sundays, especially not on like our key commercial court, like on the heart of Chestnut, heart of Union, I think we could treat that differently than say, here on Franklin Street. But I think we've got to look open-eyed at all these things. We're really in a fiscal crisis right now.
Thank you. We have yet another question on Safeway. For years, Safeway was not interested in housing co-located with supermarkets. In the last 6 months, they've done a complete opposite, a complete turnaround. What do you think is driving this change?
The sale of Albertson Safeway to the private equity fund Cerberus. Greed is another way to put it. Yeah.
They're proposing a pretty tall building out there on Bernal Heights on Merchant Street, aren't they? Do you think that that's a good project?
I don't know the neighborhood well enough. I don't want to step out of my lane there. I don't know it well enough to say.
Okay.
I know the Fillmore site better. The project that's proposed there seems to be much more in context with what the neighborhood's interested in. Bernal, I just don't know it well enough.
Sure. With an estimated 4,000 to 60,000 empty housing units in San Francisco, what is your plan to utilize these units?
I had a conversation with someone who'd been an investor in rental units in the past, and they talked to me about the problem of ghost units, not even the like pied-à-terre or second home thing, but ghost units that are in such disrepair that they can't rent them out, or where rehabilitating them would cost more than they could charge and rent for any number of factors, amenities in the buildings, neighborhood, whatever. I think we need to make sure that as I look at this, I think the idea of, well, taxing vacant units, the vacant home tax has been held up in court. So I think relying on that to get units back online probably won't help us in the short term. It seems like we're going to be ruled against on that one, so I don't want to put my eggs in that basket. As I've looked at these kind of ghost rental units where the landlords either are unwilling or can't afford in most cases to either rehabilitate them to the level that's needed to rent them out. I think we need to create much more incentives for doing that. Or when we're generating more money for affordable housing, I think the city needs to look strongly at buying existing buildings instead of building new build construction. New build construction right now costs hovering around $1 million per unit, even for affordable. It's affordable to build for $1 million, right? Yeah, right now. And so buying some of these buildings that are underwater, we all see the NEMA on Market Street. At a certain point, their debt covenants are going to come through, and I think that's going to be a great opportunity for the city. But it costs, somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 a unit to just purchase these existing buildings instead of, 2 to 4 times that much. So I think that's where I'd be looking at some of these vacant ghost units. I shouldn't say should, will be, and am looking at how do we either ensure that some of these landlords have the incentives to do the rehabilitation necessary, or B, the city is looking to buy those properties.
Thank you. We have a question about Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York, and his programs such as free childcare, free transit, and rent freezes. Do you see any of these applicable to San Francisco?
I'll deal with them each individually. Rent freezes, I think we got to be really careful. Again, we have a pretty strong rent control uh, situation here in San Francisco. We strengthened rent control protections just last week with the final passage of a measure. On that, I don't think a rent freeze makes sense here. We have such a constriction on supply that again, I'm much more focused on the supply element of that, encouraging the development of new housing in the right places. And when it comes to free buses, we're struggling enough to fund Muni without them being free that I'd rather cross that hurdle first. Do I think it's crazy to imagine a future in which rapid, robust public transit is free and available to every San Franciscan? No, I don't think that's crazy. Do I think it's wildly expensive and we got to figure out the cost structure element of that first? Yes, I do. We're not there yet. Could I see some pilots in some areas? Sure, but we're having a very different conversation, unfortunately. Now, on the childcare side, this is something that I feel deeply passionate about. Baby Prop C passed a few years ago, provided for an expansion in the childcare subsidies for families making up to 100% of the area median income. It's about $150,000 for a family of four to 150% where we are now. Baby Prop C provided the money to expand the childcare subsidy in San Francisco to families, all families making up to 200% of the area median income. The money is there. Almost $500 million are sitting in a pot, but we haven't moved that. This month, one of my biggest focuses is on working with the Department of Early Childhood on expanding the childcare subsidy for families to 200% of area median income. It is the biggest expense other than housing for young families. Childcare, when families, they have one kid, they're getting by. They have that second kid, they begin to look across the bridge. They begin to look down on the peninsula. It is really hard to start a family here. It is even harder to grow your family here. And it is even harder to stay here across generations. Free childcare up to 2 years old for all New Yorkers, I think is an incredibly interesting proposal that I think the governor of New York just agreed to fund. Right now here in San Francisco, we have free childcare for families making up to 100%, 50% of AMI. I want to push it to 200%, but we have to be honest about the fact that for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, we have enough spots for everybody who would want it. But for infants and toddlers, we only have enough spaces for a third of all infants and toddlers in San Francisco. This is another great part of the family zoning plan. It allowed more flexibility on the appropriate corridors to build things like childcare centers. How can we make it easier to have childcare centers across the city? Prop O 2024, and we just passed a law, making it easier to have reproductive health centers in more areas across the city. These kind of community resources, it is about money, but you also have to have the staffing and the actual space. Right now, we don't have enough spots for infants and toddlers. That's a different question. We've eased up the zoning to make it easier for that. But on the money side, that is actually my primary legislative focus right now in January on the hearing side of things, pushing the department to use the money that they already have. It already had. It wouldn't be a new tax. It wouldn't be a new cost to anybody. The money's $500 million, like sitting there.
How do you stand on the 5% billionaire tax initiative?
At the state, you mean?
I
Yeah.
think it's a state initiative, yeah.
I think we need to be really careful because cities and states are in a zero-sum game against each other. At the national level, this country over the last 250 years has been a center of freedom and democracy and wealth creation like there's never been seen in the world. We are an imperfect country. Don't get me wrong. We have so much work to do, but wealth creation has happened here at a level that really hasn't happened anywhere else. And that's at a national level. I think at the national level, we need to be looking at things like taxing debt taken out on people's equity. The fact that someone can live $1 billion lifestyle without selling a share of stock and triggering a tax event, to me, is crazy. I don't know if all of you are familiar with this kind of tax tactic. A billionaire will take out a loan from a bank for $1 billion based on the stock that they own, never have to pay taxes on it and just recycle and refinance and recycle and refinance and never pay taxes. That to me is absolutely crazy and wrong. I think we need to be really careful here in California that we're not encouraging people to move out. I had 2 venture funds reach out to me and saying that startups that they're looking to fund are not looking to open in California because they think if they have the opportunity to become a billionaire, that they will get taxed. So they're just opening somewhere else. Sadly, despite the fact that I think that people at the highest end of the income spectrum or wealth spectrum are not paying what they should be, we have to be careful about the fact that we're in a zero-sum game against other cities and other states for business activity. So we need to be really, really careful. But at the national level, rock and roll.
I just have one more question unless anyone has, oh, you have another one. I'll come for it in a moment. Given that you are term limited to ensure to one more 4-year term, what are your plans after this?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I have an election in June, and then I'm going to run another election in November. I am really focused politically on the June election. And quite frankly, I am focused on district issues. I mean, I am focused right now on a mandate that all high-rises built before 1975 have to install sprinklers. That I think is an inappropriate financial cost being levied on the backs of a lot of individuals who can't afford it, and on a lot of the buildings that structurally can't accommodate this. That is absolutely my focus. What happens after? I don't know. I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, for people in my position, if someone said like, what are your ambitions in the future? And the way that I think about it is that if we can deliver right now for this community, if we can drive affordability, if we can keep people in their homes, if we can make life a little bit easier for San Franciscans, regardless of age, regardless of demographic, regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality, things will be good. If we can make that progress every day, things will be good. If we can get more sidewalks fixed, things will be good. If we can get the tree that was blocking the stop sign on Webster and Pacific that I mentioned clipped yesterday, which was oh, by the way, I had someone reach out. He said, I've called 311 6 or 7 times. They haven't responded. This tree is blocking a stop sign. And I looked at it. It was crazy. Like the stop sign was like stuck in the tree. They haven't responded. They haven't done anything. Can you help? It sounds crazy. If you have one of these issues and they're not responding, please let me know. They responded within, I think, 36 hours to me asking about it. Is that the right way to do it? No, it should be responded to better, unquestionably. I won't pretend like it is. But if you're not getting an answer, like, please let me know. These things are really important. So anyway, that was kind of off on a tangent. But my position is like, there's a lot we got to do for the city right now. What happens in 5 years? Oh God, that's like not a focus at all.
Okay, we have several more questions from a D2 resident. It sounds like they live in the Marina. You have said that safety is a top priority and have identified specific people to remove from D2, but 1 year later, Charles is still harassing people on Chestnut. What's the plan?
So I just want to address the word remove quickly. There are people who are struggling on the street and they're either creating negative impacts for themselves or for others. I don't want to use the word remove. I want to use the word get into a much better place for themselves and for us. These are people who desperately need our help, and getting them into a better place makes life safer for everyone, including them. Charles, I don't know if people know Charles, spare a dollar guy on Chestnut Street. Someone here does, clearly. I won't use this person's last name. They're a great example of gaps. And what do I mean by gaps? There are a lot of people on the streets who probably dangerous, but not quite criminal, probably unwell, but not quite unwell enough to conserve, shall we say. They meet the reasonable person criteria of, hey, we're reasonable people. This person, we got to figure something else out here. And right now in the state of California, there are gaps in the reasonable person standard. A lawyer recently said the reasonable person standard is a legal term. I'm not using it as a legal term. I'm not a lawyer. So this man is very large. He is very threatening, especially to women. He likes to stand outside of Two Skirts, a women's boutique that's run by a couple of fantastic entrepreneurs. And he especially harasses teenage girls. Um, he kicked a woman about 5 months ago. No significant injuries, thankfully, but very scary. And he harasses people. So when we started the foot patrol on Chestnut on August, the officer checks in with him at least once a day. We have seen reports on him harassing people go down a little bit, but this is anecdotal. It's not scientific. One of the things I think is very important in some of these commercial areas, and I know we have to be careful about this, so take it with a grain of salt. Having security cameras in some of these areas is one of the #1 ways to ensure safety. The incident where he kicked the woman, she was the only person who was there to see it. Because she had no visible injuries, her word is not enough for them to charge somebody or even arrest. That's how, working with the district attorney, we walked it through the 9 of the 10 steps, and the 10th step was to get an arrest. And they said one person's testimony without visual proof is not enough. Now, at the same time, we say, okay, well, this person clearly is mentally having a hard time. How do we conserve somebody? To conserve someone, they have to prove that either they're a clear danger to others, and because of this police history where he hasn't been arrested yet, he hasn't proved that he's a clear danger to others. And you have to do it multiple times. Or he's a clear danger to himself. Hasn't proved that. If you say, hello, you look like you're struggling. Do you have access to food and shelter? And if you were to say, see this cardboard box, I've got that. And I think there's a banana in the trash can, I'm going to get that. That counts as being able to access food and shelter. This is under the state laws. I think if someone is constantly rooting through a trash can for a banana peel, if someone is constantly defecating on the side of an early childhood education center, that probably speaks to significant challenges that should require us as a city to stand up and say, we need to put you in a hospital. And under the state conservatorship laws, it doesn't. Now, we also have a problem. We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough conservatorship beds, and we're adding 25 step-down beds. It's basically a fentanyl drunk tank, if you will, and that's operated by the sheriff, so there will be a law enforcement component as well as a health component right on site. That's great, but that's for drugs. That doesn't take into account of this. So it's a combination of things, and right now the biggest strategy we have is identifying these individuals, touching them as many times as possible. There's a different individual who's struggling on Magnolia Street for a while, 70 times. It was the 71st contact that he agreed to go inside. It's not sustainable. It's not scalable, but right now that's what we got. And I'm going to continue to push hard on that. It's not the perfect answer, but I think when we look at, we need more beds for conservatorship for sure. We're the only county in the 9-county Bay Area that doesn't have a locked dual diagnosis facility, mental health and drug rehabilitation. Prison is not the answer for these things. Prison doesn't solve this. It's not compassionate. It's not cost effective. It just doesn't lead to better outcomes. But I think we do need one of those facilities either here in San Francisco or across. This might not be a popular thing to say. Prop 1, where the state gave a lot of money to local counties to administer these mental health and drug rehabilitation clinics. I don't think that's been successful. I think this needs to be a statewide approach, so we're not pitting counties against each other. Oh, hey, San Francisco's got more services. Let's just send the person there. This needs to be a statewide approach as well.
Okay, another question from our Marina resident. I do not support all the changes by SFMTA, which have contributed greatly to congestion. Is it not all Waymo, Uber, Lyft, etc.? If it were not for them, I guess. Fewer lanes and fewer parking spaces are very responsible for the increased congestion. How are you going to fix SFMTA's congestion issues?
I think one of the hardest things about the analysis is that the growth of changes in the streetscape has happened at the exact same time as the expansive growth of ride shares, making things really difficult to look at. And I think that's just hard from an analysis point of view. I think the MTA needs to be much clearer about the administration of their different programs with Muni and, basically Muni on one side and streetscape on the other side. I think we need to make it clear to residents where the money for each of those is coming from and where it's going. Residents need to be clear about where things are going, where that money is, in order to understand and support the right strategies. So, for instance, with homelessness spending, we spend almost $1 billion on homelessness, and people say, cut back the nonprofits. And that may well be true. Someone said, well, this nonprofit hasn't filed a financial disclosure form since 2020, yet we're giving them a $69 million contract. And I said, that's a fair complaint. Now, the reality is 68 million of that is a direct pass through for rent for their clients. But there's no way any of you would have known that. And I happen to know that because I was sitting with the guy administering the contract and I asked him to walk me through it. That level of detail where it does it make sense? Oh, okay, if $68 million is a pass through and we're just paying rent for people, let's make that clear. Is that the right thing? Is that the wrong thing? We can all decide. We're all relatively smart people. Do we support that or not? But at least it's clear. Oh, it's not $69 million going to a nonprofit with no accountability. It's $1 million going to a nonprofit to administer a $68 million rent check program. Ah, okay. Similarly with the MTA, I think when there is clarity over where the money is coming from and where it's going, whether it's for muni or streetscape improvements. And one concern I've had is we're wasting so much money on streetscape improvements and not going towards muni. Why doesn't it go there? Well, one of the reasons is because the ballot measure that funds a lot of the streetscape improvements said the money can't go towards muni. So that's hard, but we don't tell people about that. So what do I think? I think MTA needs to communicate better, full stop, across everything. I think things like the neck down that they tried on, oh, I'm having a brain fart.
It was Judah.
Judah, thank you.
Yeah.
The neck down on Judah was clearly not the right idea. And thankfully they're going back and changing that. But that's, $1 million mistake. That's expensive. Maybe not $1 million, but that's expensive work to do. It's probably not $1 million. And so similarly on Lombard Street, there were some pedestrian issues and they quickly retimed the lights. And since then, there have been no pedestrian accidents since they retimed the lights on Lombard. That was smart. That was the right thing to do. I think going forward, we need to be honest about the fact that parking is brutal. I think the red zones and the yellow zones need to become dynamic. 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday, blocking off a yellow space is crazy. I mean, I was on Fillmore yesterday. There was not one delivery truck on Saturday. Delivery trucks don't deliver on Fillmore on Saturdays. It's not happening. Those can be dynamic meters. Technology works. Meter prices change throughout the day based on demand. We need to have dynamic meters for parking. I think that is one of the things that has to happen in the next 5 years, or else my head's going to explode along with many, many others. But it starts with communication and clarity.
Okay, for our last question, I'm going to reword this one just a little bit. I want to make sure we keep a friendly tone. This person does not like YIMBY policies and sees Scott Wiener as being really a YIMBY representative. So you seem to represent YIMBY policies. How about focusing on D2 residents and their interests instead of citywide and state residents?
District 2 is 70% renter. The rent burdens, the housing burdens on the district are significant. When I go and I knock on doors, the cost of living in San Francisco is neck and neck with public safety when I ask people what their priorities are. This city is not going to succeed if we don't make it easier for people across the income spectrum to live here. In District 2, people want Union Street to be thriving. Union Street merchants say their foot traffic is down. Yes, we need tourists back up, but population is down in the city too, and affordability is a big part of that. But they also say that the people that it's hard to hire people who live close enough to get to work. In terms of focus on District 2 needs, District 2 residents, our constituent services arm focusing on the cracked sidewalks, focusing on making sure that people's tax assessments, when they send it in and they get sent back saying, hey, you didn't pay it the right way, your stamp was dated the wrong way, following up with the tax assessor, those things are really important. Ensuring that people over at MLK are getting treated the right way by the housing authority. Those things are really important. My focus is on public safety, number one, because that is the basis for every strong city, every strong community. My focus is on legislatively been on supporting the small business corridors because they've been struggling. 2024 was the worst year for restaurants in San Francisco across the city and in District 2. This is coming from the former owner of Roses. Roses, by the way, changed ownership. Long-term manager bought it, took over, 0 staff turnover, really incredible, great. This was coming from them. That shows that we need to focus and support our small business community. And anybody who says that affordability and housing constraints aren't a problem in District 2, I just don't agree with that.
Wonderful. Supervisor Sherrill, thank you so much for this amazing talk.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for having me. And again, I just want to say, like, this community has been a great force for good for 175 years. There we go. 75. Thank you. 175 years. Yes, of course. Duh. For 175 years. And I would just encourage you to keep being loud. Keep wearing the t-shirt. Keep being loud. We need you more than ever, not only for the city and the state, but really for the country and I think the larger world. So I would just encourage you, whether it's championing environmental justice, whether it's championing, climate change policies, remaining a sanctuary city, these things are very important. So I just encourage you to keep speaking up. And I appreciate being able to be here with all of you this morning. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just repeat a couple of announcements before we go. So next Sunday, we have another supervisor here. We have Connie Chan from District 1. She'll be here. And then after church, we have another event in this space. We have an event to commemorate MLK and his contributions to the labor movement. So that's next Sunday. And then on the last Sunday of the month, we have A Grandmother's Wisdom. This is about a book written by Frances Aubrey. She's a Unitarian. I think it'll be a really interesting presentation. I also want to mention that this coming Saturday at the Irish Cultural Center, which is on 45th Avenue out in the Sunset, there is an event called Irish Musicians and Friends playing a fundraising concert for the children of Gaza. So that is from 2 to 11 p.m. this coming Saturday, the 17th. Thank you and hope to see you all back next Sunday.